Okay, so I have a designer tool, a series of designer tools that I'm going to create. And the one that I'm focusing on right now is one where when I drag an object around, like right now, like I'm doing it as Unity normally does, I want it to automatically align and conform to the walls. But right now it's not. It's just moving along the axis or the planes that I'm telling it to move along. So how can I get it to automatically realign to an axis? Well, right now I've got a designer tool and we'll dive into the code. I'm going to enable align normal. And now when I do that, I click on this to move it around and it's moving just like it did before. But when I move it to another surface, it automatically realigns to those surfaces. All right, so how do we accomplish this? The total length of the code is about 60 lines of code, so not too much, but there's a few things to go over. First thing is we are going to execute in edit mode. That means that our update will run inside of the editor. It's got two things it's going to check for. One, align normal. If align normal is true, remember, that's just that Boolean value over here. Second off, are we in move mode? Move mode is just a Boolean value that we're going to set. And if we do, then we are going to align normal. Now, I'll get to what that does. First, I want to get these two values and show you how we get them. So we need to know where the mouse position is inside of the scene view. Specifically. Second, we need to know if we're in move mode, which is not just are we dragging an object. There's several things we need to verify to make sure that we're actually there. So let's take a look at what they are. So we have over here the designer, and now I've got a custom editor for the type of designer. And that is designer editor. I'm using this is because in the method for on-scene GUI, this gets called anytime that there's some form of update going on in the scene. First thing I'm doing is I'm grabbing the designer. That's the object up here that we currently have selected. And now I'm getting the current mouse position over the window. There's this weird thing that it does where the XY alignment according to the camera texture versus the window where the mouse is, the Y is flipped. All I need to do in order to correct the Y position, because when I go up, the position goes down, we're just going to take the current camera and get its pixel height and subtract our Y position from it. We're also doing something else called mouse overview window. Editor window.mouse overview window. If you are doing custom design tools inside of Unity, this is one of the most important elements in my opinion. So this tells you what your mouse is currently over. When you think of a tool like Blender, and I'm sure plenty of other tools have features like this, but when you're inside of Blender, you move your mouse over different panels within it, and the hotkeys will change. If I move my mouse over the texture panel and hit Control C, that copies the texture panel. I didn't have to click into it. I didn't have to select the panel. I just have to have my mouse over that panel. Same thing if I moved it over to the vertice editor, then I can have the selection of vertices, and when I hit Control C, it copies those ones instead. We're going to define whether or not we're actually in move mode, whether our designer tools should be paying attention to this. So one, are we currently in a mouse drag event type? So the mouse drag event type, that happens when I've selected an object and I'm dragging it around. Now, this also happens inside of other editor panels. So if I select another editor panel and I've got a custom window in there and I've got drag drop tools operating inside of there, I could still have a component with this designer selected in the hierarchy, and I could be dragging objects around. So I need to take a look at the mouse overview window that I took from editor.mouse overview window. And I'm going to detect whether or not it is a scene view. In fact, I could just do this. Control X and paste that there. Okay. So if the editor window.mouse overview window is the scene view, so that means we've got a drag drop operation going on inside of the overview window. The last thing I'm doing is I'm making sure that my actual selection is the current designer game object. I haven't tested to see whether or not this is the case, but honestly, when you're talking about designer tooling, it's better to go overkill in your conditions checks. At runtime, you want to reduce your condition checks as much as you can so it doesn't have to do as much processing. But inside of the editor, you've got a lot more freedom, especially when you're checking individual movements and not something that's editing 1,000 items at once. Inside of this, I want to check, is my current object selected. Now, there may be other things. I haven't tested this. If I click and drag one of the UI panels for the tools inside of there while I've got my object selected, is it going to count it as a mouse drag? Actually, hey, I'm here right now. Why don't I test this? So I've got this item. Great. I've got that there. Now I'm going to mouse over here with the other object selected. Okay. It didn't trigger it. Awesome. Cool. So that did determine that the dragging of this is different than the dragging of this, even though the object was still selected. Important to know and test those features and pay attention to when those types of issues happen. We now know our mouse position. We now know that we are in move mode. So now the last thing we have is the align normal. We are in move mode. We know the position that we're checking. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the scene view camera. Now this is two different ways to get the exact same camera. Get all scene cameras and then get the first one that it gives us. Or we could also go to scene view and say, give us the current drawing scene view dot camera. And that does the exact same thing. Now we're creating an array that is based on that camera, starting from that camera, going out to where the mouse position is over the scene. So it figures out where that alignment offsets and gives us a raycast in that direction. And now we're going to get a collection of hits from the physics raycast object. We are going to sort the array based on distance. This is important because we want to take the first object that we're hitting. And honestly, I'm not that certain if raycast comes back in order or not. I don't think it does. But anyway, so that's one of the reasons I've got this. I haven't tested otherwise. So now we're going to go through every one of those hits that we came into. If there were none, we exit out of this right away, and it's going to be the normal tooling that Unity does by default. So if we start dragging this over an empty background, actually I can show that. I'm just going to drag this and it's aligning, but then I drag it over here and now it's just aligning to the plane that I dragged it out of. Now it's back inside of here on the planes. Okay, so now let's take a look at what we're checking inside of here. If it doesn't have a collider, then we don't need to compare this object at all, which honestly, I'm not sure of a condition where it wouldn't have a collider because we're checking collisions from raycast all with physics. So I should be able to get rid of that. Let's just delete. All right, so hcollider.transform, we're checking to see whether or not the collider's transform is not our own object. And we're also checking to see if it is not a child of our object. As long as it is not our own transform or a child of it, then the transform.position is just going to equal whatever the hit point was. And then we're going to take our transform.up, which is not just a read, it has a setter. So we can readjust our normal based on the surface that we're aligning it to this way. So if I'm aligning it to a wall and I have this point come here, then the normal is now going to shape it that way. If the wall is like this and I have the object there, then the normal is like that, or the object will snap to it like that. And then I return because that's our first object that is not our own. And so we are aligning to it. All right, that's it. I hope you found this helpful. I'll talk to you later.